On March 26, 2024, at 1:28 in the morning, a 984-foot container ship called the Dali struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland. The bridge fell in under 10 seconds. 6 construction workers were filling potholes on the roadway. They fell 185 feet into the Patapsco River. None of them survived. The ship had lost all power. No propulsion, no steering. By the time anyone on board understood what was happening, the Dali was already drifting toward the bridge at 8 knots. This was not a freak accident. The National Transportation Safety Board spent nearly 2 years on this investigation. What they found was not a story about a loose wire. It was a story about a calculation that had been sitting in a drawer for 18 years. Maryland had been warned, in writing, that this bridge could be destroyed by a ship. The NTSB found that the risk of collapse was 30 times higher than what federal standards consider acceptable. The state did nothing. To understand why this bridge fell, you need to understand what it was up against. The Francis Scott Key Bridge opened in 1977. It was a steel truss bridge, 1.6 miles long, carrying 34,000 vehicles a day across one of the busiest shipping channels on the East Coast. When they built it, the largest container ships in the world carried around 3,000 containers. The Dali carried nearly 10,000. Fully loaded, it displaces over 200 million pounds of water. At 8 knots, the force that mass delivers to a bridge pier is not something the concrete from 1977 was designed to absorb. After a ship destroyed Florida's Sunshine Skyway Bridge in 1980, killing 35 people, federal regulations changed. New bridges were required to have pier protection, massive barriers designed to deflect a ship before it ever contacts the structure. The Key Bridge was built before those rules. It was grandfathered in. When the updated standards took effect in 1991, existing bridges were exempt. The piers of the Key Bridge stood in the water with no meaningful protection between them and the shipping channel. In 2006, an official from the Maryland Transportation Authority raised this in writing. Pier protection was inadequate. The bridge was vulnerable to a ship strike. The state took no meaningful action. That warning was the first entry on the paper trail. It would not be the last. AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, sets the standard for what counts as an acceptable collapse risk. For a critical bridge like the Key Bridge, the threshold is 1 in 10,000 per year, a risk so small it registers as almost theoretical. The NTSB ran the actual numbers. The Key Bridge's real risk was 30 times that threshold, 30 times. That is what happens when you apply 1977 infrastructure to 2024 ships without ever updating the math. Maryland had the math. They chose not to act on it. On the night of March 26th, the Dali left the port of Baltimore at 12:44 a.m., bound for Sri Lanka. 2 harbor pilots were on board. 2 tugboats guided the vessel out of its berth. By 1:08 a.m., the tugs were released, standard procedure. The ship was in the main channel at roughly 8 to 10 knots. At 1:24 a.m., everything went dark. Complete electrical blackout, lights out, steering dead, engine down. The ship was 3,200 feet from the bridge and drifting. The cause was a single loose wire, not an engine explosion, not catastrophic mechanical failure. A signal wire with a plastic label band installed in the wrong position. The band physically pushed the wire away from its terminal, preventing a solid connection. The NTSB chair described it this way: locating that wire among thousands of connections is like looking for a loose bolt in the Eiffel Tower. That kind of fault is detectable. Thermal imaging scanners, widely used and standard equipment in industrial settings, can identify bad electrical connections before they fail. They were not part of routine inspections on the Dali. The crew got partial power back at 1:25 a.m., but the ship had already begun turning toward the bridge. Then the second blackout hit. When the first failure occurred, the ship's generators stayed running, but they relied on a flushing pump to supply fuel. That pump required a manual restart after any power loss. It was not designed to restart automatically. To get it running again, a crew member had to leave the engine room, descend 2 decks in complete darkness, and manually activate it. They did not get there in time. The generators ran dry. The second blackout was total. No propulsion, no steering, nothing. At 1:27 a.m., the pilot issued a mayday call. Stop traffic on the bridge. Maryland Transportation Authority officers responded. They blocked vehicles from entering the bridge at 1:28 a.m. That decision saved an unknown number of lives. At 1:28 a.m. and 45 seconds, the Dali struck Pier 17. The bridge was gone in less than 10 seconds. 6 men were on that bridge: Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, Carlos Hernandez, Dorian Roniel Castillo Cabrera, Mena Yasir Suazo Sandoval, Miguel Angel Luna Gonzalez, and Jose Minor Lopez. They were fathers and husbands and brothers, immigrants from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They were filling potholes at 1:30 in the morning so that 34,000 drivers could safely cross the bridge the next day. The Mayday call went out. Traffic was stopped. But nobody called the construction inspector. Nobody told the workers to leave. The NTSB found that the failure to communicate with the highway crew directly contributed to the loss of life. They never knew the ship was coming. One worker was pulled from the Patapsco River with serious injuries. A construction inspector on the bridge escaped. The last vehicle crossed safely 31 seconds before impact. The bodies of the 6 men were recovered from the river over the following weeks. When the NTSB released its final report in November 2025, the chair opened the hearing with a statement that has no ambiguity in it. None of us should be here today. This tragedy should have never occurred. Lives should have never been lost. As with all accidents we investigate, this was preventable. The 2006 warning about pier protection was shelved. The 1991 regulations requiring pier protection on new bridges left the Key Bridge exempt. The AASHTO calculation showed a risk 30 times above the acceptable threshold, and it was not acted on. And then there was the criminal case. In May 2026, federal prosecutors charged Synergy Marine, the Singapore-based company that operated the Dali, along with its technical superintendent. The charges included conspiracy, willfully failing to inform the U.S. Coast Guard of a known hazardous condition, obstruction, false statements, and misconduct resulting in death. The indictment alleged that Synergy Marine knew about the electrical problems on the Dali before the ship ever left Baltimore. They knew. They sailed anyway. The replacement bridge will cost between $4.3 billion and $5.2 billion. It will not open until at least 2030. It will have pier protection. The lesson of the Francis Scott Key Bridge is not that a loose wire is dangerous. The lesson is that risk, once calculated, becomes a choice. Maryland calculated the risk. The NTSB confirmed the calculation was 30 times worse than what was acceptable, and for 18 years the state chose not to act. The failure was not that nobody saw it coming. The failure was that they did. If you want to keep following the warnings the world ignored, subscribe. Every disaster leaves a paper trail. We follow it.